Okay, so make the connection as we go, and you can make notes when we're done. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to talk to you today about how you as an individual can make a difference. Because it seems like when you're just one little person who lives in a small town, like we do, that it's hard when you see that there's big needs in the world to feel like you could ever make a difference. So have you ever, in the news things that you watch in your class, or newspaper articles that you read, or books that you read, have you ever been made aware of huge needs in the world, whether it's poverty or abuse or whatever, where you think, there's so many horrible things in the world, you can't talk. How can I, as one person, make a difference? It's easy to feel like you're only just one little person. Now, you may live in a big city where there's millions of people, like so many do, and feel like just one little person amongst so many can't do so much. Or like you guys, you live in a small town, so okay, you can have a little bit of an influence on a few people, but in the vast scheme of things, can you really make a difference? Well, I'm going to tell you about somebody who did make a big difference. Go to the next one. So this man, his name is Nicholas Winton. He lived, he was a young man in 1938. He lived in England, and it was right as the Nazis began to invade countries in Europe. And he was just about ready to go on a vacation when his friend called him. His friend was working in a refugee camp in Czechoslovakia. Now, as the Nazis were taking over all these countries, the Jews especially would try to get out of those countries ahead of them, and Czechoslovakia was one of the countries that they would go to. So his friend was working in one of these camps where these families would come in to these refugee camps, and they were desperate trying to get out of Europe because they knew the Nazis were just going to come, right? Scary to think it's a true story, but it was. So he decided to cancel his trip, and he went to this camp. And what he saw really disturbed him, and he really wanted to make a difference. There were these families, and the adults knew that it would be really hard for them to get out, but they really wanted their children to be able to go to a safe place until the war was over. So what he did was he decided that there was something he could do. He didn't feel like he could save everyone, but one thing he thought he could do was something that was being done in other areas, which was they would make these trains, they would arrange for these trains to take children out of these countries. And they would try to get them to England, which was the only country that would let them in at the time. This was a year before the United States got into the war. Mr. F., go ahead and do the next one. So he knew that if he did not get a lot of these children out of these countries, that they were going to end up in a concentration camp where most of them would die. Now, how many Jews died in World War II? If you know, raise your hand. Colton?
About 1 million.
No, that's a little less. Rachel?
Billions?
No. Taya?
5.
Close. 6 million Jews. Just Jews, not the soldiers who were fighting, but just the Jews died. That's a lot of people. So he knew that if he could get some of these trains to go out of Czechoslovakia with these children, that he would be able to save a few lives. So this is one of the children he saved. He ended up establishing 8 trains, and each of these trains carried almost 200 children. No, that's not right. 50 children. Anyway, by the end of the war, he was able to get 669 children out of Czechoslovakia, which in the vast scheme of things, was he able to save 6 million? No, he was able to save 669, but at least there were 669, right? Go ahead. So he was just one person. So in the vast scheme of things, 669 kids, that's about how many people live in the Clark Fork area. That's still quite a few people, right? Go ahead. So there's a story I want to tell you about starfish. You might have heard it. So one day there's a young man, and he's walking along the ocean, and ahead of him is a beach, and it has thousands and thousands of starfish on it who washed up in the tide. And ahead of him, he sees an old man who's walking along the beach ahead of him. And he slowly picks a starfish up and tosses it in the water. And he'll walk a little farther and pick a starfish and toss it into the water. And the young man comes up to him and says, "What are you doing?" He said, "It's starting to get warm, and every starfish that's on this beach is going to die. So I'm trying to throw them back in." And the young man said, "There are thousands of them. You could work all day long and you would hardly make a difference." And the old man leans down and he grabs a starfish and he tosses it in, and he said, "It made a difference for that one." And he keeps going, tosses in as many as he can. So, there's the starfish. Go ahead. So, for every one of those starfish he tossed back in, did it die?
No.
No, that one lived, right? So, we're going to talk about you for a second. You have a choice in what you do, right? Can you make a choice, Caitlin, for Taya? You can't. You can make a choice for Taya. So every one of you, it's easy to say, "Oh, I wish he would do this." But can you really control what he does? No, you can control you. So, go ahead, dear. When you interact with someone else, it could be someone in your family, it could be someone in your class, it could be someone at church or at the library, wherever you go, you have a choice in how you treat them, right? So you can treat other people with anger. Now this man, Nicholas Winton, he saw people in that war who were treating each other with horrible, horrible things. Anger and distrust and hatred and prejudice, right? And as a result, he saw millions of people die. So when you make a choice, and your choice is to treat someone with anger or hatred or unkindness, that action goes to that person. But you know what? It also ripples outward. So let's say you, Ember, were to treat someone not very nice at school. Sorry to use you as an example. If she has a bad day at school, or the person that she treated poorly has a bad day at school, they're going to go home and what are they going to do? Or they're going to be mad or grumpy and they're going to go home and treat other people that way, right? And it ripples outward from there. Go ahead, Tina. Yes, Tina. Yeah, I know. Yeah, bullying is another thing. Boy, it ripples outward. So the ripples that go outward, are they going to be positive or negative? Every time? If you treat someone with anger, the ripples are going to be negative every time. Now, the people you treat poorly, they have a choice too, right? With how they act. So they could go home and they could feel grumpy or sad with how they were treated. So if they make a choice, they can either keep it inside and feel sad and grumpy, or they can make those actions ripple outward. But what happens if you, go ahead, treat someone with kindness or compassion? So, can you think of a time, I don't want you to raise your hand, but I just want you to think in your head, has someone treated you with kindness today? If you can think of someone who treated you that way, think of how it made you feel, and do the ripple effects of that action make negative or positive? Hopefully positive, right? Now again, you have a choice. Someone treats you nice, you could go treat someone like garbage, but probably you won't. When Mrs. Majors treats you well, and I love watching her teach you because she is very kind. She's firm, right? She has expectations for you, but she's kind in how she does it. So when she's kind to you, it makes you want to be kind to other people. When your mom or your dad or your grandma is nice to you, then it makes you want to be nice to other people. So it goes outward from you out into the world. Go on to the next one. You can go one more. We already talked about it. Okay, so again, we're not talking about how Joe is going to control Ember, or how Ember is going to control Brooke. We're talking about Joe. We're talking about Ember and Ashley. Okay, so what can you do? Go to the next one. I want you to close your eyes for a second. Yes, all of you. Carter. I want you to think, close your eyes, it's not that hard. I want you to think, Andon, close your eyes. I want you to think of someone that you know today who needs some help. It shouldn't really be that hard. Maybe Brooke needs help.
I just thought it was for that I can think of something.
That's good. Okay, now I want you to think of one thing that you could do for them today. If you can't think, we'll come back to that. Okay, hold on to that person. Okay, so now, with that said, let's go back to Sir Nicholas. He was a sir because later on he he was knighted by the queen for what he'd done. So he did not tell anyone for 50 years what he had done. And even then he didn't tell anyone, but his wife was rooting around in the attic, and she found a scrapbook that he put together of all the lists, the train lists of all these children. Because what would happen is these mothers and fathers would come to him and say, we hear that you're trying to get these children out of the country. Can my child please be on your train? And so he had lists and lists and lists. He had like 5,000 children whose parents came to him asking for help. How many did he get out? 669. So he wasn't able to get them all, but he was able to get a lot. So they would come to him and he'd keep lists. Well, his wife found this and went, what is this? Because he'd never talked about it.
So all the other kids that he their children died.
They all went to concentration camps and died
How did they die?
in gas chambers. Yeah, it's
Why
horrible.
would people
No, it's
do
horrible. Read about it. It's horrible. So what he did was saving their lives. He sent them on these trains and he sent them out. Just a minute, Anna. They would put them in a room and put poison gas in them. That's how 6 million Jews died, guys. It's horrible. Okay, hold on, Rachel. We got to keep going. So he had this scrapbook. So his wife found this scrapbook and said, "What is this?" And he finally told her about it. They'd been married for 50 years and he'd never told her about it. So what she did was she said, we should start hunting down and see what happened to all these kids. So slowly they gathered and gathered, and in 1988, it was 50 years, it wasn't too long after she found the journal, they decided to gather together as many of these children as they could. And go to the next one. Keep going. We're going to show you a little clip of this, one of the meetings he had. So this is in England, you'll be able to tell by their accents, but there's a group of people who've gathered to talk about Nicholas Winton. Andon, will you turn off the light, please, in the back?
Back here is the list of all the children. This is Vera Diamant, now Vera Gissing. We did find her name on his list. Vera Gissing is with us here tonight. Hello, Vera. And I should tell you that you are actually sitting next to Nicholas Winton.
And it was just so wonderful, so terribly, terribly touching.
Can I ask, is there anyone in our audience tonight who owes their life to Nicholas Winton? If so, could you stand up, please?
Those are the children. All right, and then turn that light back on. Just the back one. The next one, please. I don't know, it's just someone who was at the beginning of the video. Okay, so did what he did make a difference? No.
Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead to the next one. Made a difference to her, I think.
Yeah.
To the next one. And guess what? Those 669 people with their children and their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren, there's now 6,000 people who owe their lives to him. Pretty cool, huh?
Why were the kids' parents?
And many of them died. Some of them found them after the war. I don't know. You'd have to do some research to find out how many actually found their parents. But if they didn't find their parents, then they were adopted by families in other countries. Go ahead. Okay, so you, like Nicholas Winton, he couldn't help all 6 million Jews who died, but he was able to help some. So you may not be able to touch everybody or make a difference in everybody's day, but little starfish. So you have a choice. How you treat people, the difference that you choose to make in the world. I think you've seen in some of your news things in class how there's a child somewhere who decides, I read about something that's going on the other side of the world and I want to help somehow. And you can. You can't help everybody, but you can help an awful lot of people. So after today, I really want you to think of what you can do and really go out and make a difference. You can turn that off. Okay, you're good. Thank you.
Uh-huh.